Alrighty, over the summer of '08, I chose to roll out IPv6 on a single state 4-city network. It's now become larger after an acquisition, but we'll figure out how the rollout extends further when the time comes. Chose to do this because I figured it was easier to campaign for everything else related to V6 deployments if this piece was complete. So, quick touch on the architecture I was dealing with. 4 POPs, 2 core routers per POP, 1 small POP, but otherwise it's GSR. Connecting to our Upstream Transits is entirely GSR, and the customers are a mix of platforms. Thankfully, at least one of them is going away. General strategy was V4, V6 dual stack deployment on any and every box that was V6 capable. Looking at our lifestyle going forward, this covered all the upstream, most of the core, Ethernet in our 2 larger POPs, and T3s and higher in the 1 POP that had a dedicated GSR for that category of customer. So for our deployment tactics, unfortunately we had no effective testing lab available to us. I do not have a GSR, do not have a SUP 720 in any way set aside for us to experiment on, but we do have 2N redundancy throughout our core layer. So just push the traffic away from one core, through it all in the other one. Different commands depending on what IGP was in use, and that we'll talk about the implications there coming up. Scheduled a reload in 20, applied the commands I had queued up, crossed fingers, waited, looks good, canceled the reload. And for the most part, that was what it took. For us, VPN access from home came through our San Antonio POP. So I began in San Antonio, worked my way through our Dallas POP, worked through external stuff in the Dallas area, continued through Houston and came my way back around to San Antonio, and did it very progressively. 1 router the first day, 2 routers the next day, and so on. Sequentially, that meant that the first night was really just, do these commands blow up the router, and nothing further. The second night was the next router across a link, and allowed us to see if the various protocols actually worked and if routes were being learned where they should be. First phase covered interface addressing and OSPF v3. So once the second router was up, we got to see an OSPF adjacency get built. And then the second phase was rolling out BGP. So the basis of our configurations is our 2 large POPs, Dallas and Houston, are used to announce our aggregate routes out of the core layer. So the second router to get done in phase 2 allowed us to see our aggregate route get shared amongst all the V6 capable routers in our network. Assigned to /32 from Aaron. Initially made the mistake of trying to slice it up and use way too many Fs. Tried to use the very highest 48 in the range to do our internal operations, and that was getting effing old. Use zeros, it just makes life so much easier. So technically we're current, but we're almost there yet, and squishing back down to the 0 block to make things easier for production and corporate stuff. Internal addressing was the one area that I found was the big unknown. Because the networks that already had V6 rolled out, but were considering it their competitive advantage and were therefore not willing to talk about it, I kind of didn't know what to do, and it finally just became pick something, think about it, refine it, and then do it. So for our router loopbacks, I'm missing a colon between the F1B8 and the POP. We used, all of our POPs are numbered, and then within each POP, the various routers have a particular node ID. And so the loopback addressing basically has 4 fields, the 2607, F1B8, 2 colons, and then a POP number and a node number. Links within a POP are addressed as the prefix : the POP number, and then just a sequential link ID that we track internally, and then an endpoint ID. And we use the 112 mask, so it falls on the colon boundary. And therefore, there are 5 fields in use in those addresses, so you can begin to recognize the difference between a loopback with 4 and an interpop with 5, and an interpop link that has 6 fields in use, referencing the lower numeric POP number and the higher numeric POP number, and then a sequential link ID running between those POPs, and then an endpoint ID with a 112-bit mask. So one of the lessons learned was define endpoint ID very carefully before you start doing this. I tried to get way too fancy by using the POP ID numbers or router ID numbers on either end of the endpoints, and just kind of forgot the right numbering sequence as I was doing it. For us, it simply became easier to use :1 and :2 across the board. We kept having endpoint collisions, and why am I not seeing routes and so forth. But once I slapped myself and got standardized on 1 and 2, life was a whole lot easier going forward. So our customer assignment plan, we would reserve a range and use 112s for their WAN or interconnect link. Customers getting V6 would get a /56 automatically. If they requested, they'd get a /48. If they wanted more than that, we'd do it on a one-off basis. In reality, no customers with V6, so there's unfortunately no data there to use. Our general plan for assigning those addresses to customers was to divide and conquer, starting off with the very middle and then kind of doing 50-50 splits thereafter, so that going forward we have the maximum chance at any one point for a customer to expand their range should they ever ask to later. And we're dark ages, but we're using the spreadsheet for now. I understand the acquiring company has a bit of a address management tool, so we'll see what that works, how well that works for us. But for now, the spreadsheet worked. It's worked for us in V4. Go away. It is what it is. 6 years ago, as we began V4 dynamic routing and finally came into the century, we started with OSPF. It's what we knew at the time. 3 years ago, switched to ISIS. Bunch of reasons, one of which we wanted to get away from some OSPF legacy issues we had, and some other benefits. However, we've gone back to OSPF. As part of this process, we had significant deployment challenges because of multi-topology in ISIS. I probably could have survived had I gone through and deployed multi-topology. It seems as though you've got to have multi-topo support from day one prior to doing anything with V6 ISIS, and I do believe you've got to leave it there permanently because it's essentially impossible to do your V4 and V6 commands truly simultaneously when you're adding a new link or a new router. We had major bomb outs when we tried to put V6 if you didn't have everything lined up perfectly. So we're back on OSPF once again and stayed with the same IBGP hack as we did in V4, loopbacks and interpop links and interpop links in the IGP, everything else upstream and downstream remaining in BGP. Internal services. We have none. Like I said, my goal was to get something out there and let everything else kind of begin following from phase one. Our internal DNS, web, and mail is handled by our IT department. They are not ready yet for V6, but at least I can say I'm done and the ball's in their court. We are essentially more of a wholesale bit mover. Most of our customers are ISPs of a smaller nature, so our assumption is if they've got a need for web, mail, or DNS, they'll do so within their own network, and we'll survive until we're pushed into a need to do so. Upstream Transit dropped an email to Cogent, said, we'd like V6, what does it take? Answer was not yet, and we have no roadmap for putting it out there. Contacted AboveNet, not yet, no roadmap. Contacted NTT, we'd be glad to, for some money. Very small increment, but I just amazingly hadn't heard that song sung before. It came as a bit of a surprise. So in the interim, we've got a Hurricane Electric tunnel. We've got now some operational experience. Our prefix is out there. Because I have no V6 DNS, I don't really know what to go ping or trace route. So as I see random V6 addresses on mailing list posts, I go see if we can reach them. Goes back to our internal services. So state of the packets, so far so good. Once we got past our bombed out attempts to try with ISIS, the transition was incredibly smooth. Really just came down to 10 p.m. a couple of nights, applied some commands, and routers were happy and stable. No customer demand yet, but we're still trying to catch up to get this deployed in a lot of places where the customers can actually use it. So I have this full expectation that sales will sell it, and we'll all of a sudden have no ability to deliver it. But to the best of our knowledge, the equipment roadmap is restricted to V6 capable gear, so at least going forward, we'll be better positioned. So once we got going, it went well. Anyone who said there isn't revenue to be made with V6 hasn't picked up the phone, because when I got that call from NTT saying gladly for a fee, I realized, maybe there is some option for revenue. And as an aside, I can only assume that the availability of V6 on their transit connections and whatever price difference there might be is going to influence our decisions going forward. I've plopped in two config snippets. These are very shortened, just enough to show the global and interface level commands that we plopped in. See other talks I've given for basis of metric values, and you can reference the earlier slides to find the addressing formats. This is taken from our Dallas POP, which is POP number 2, and Core 2, which is router ID number 2. And the link shown there goes from POP 2 to POP 3, which is Houston. It's the third link going between those cities. And it's on the Dallas side, which is the lower numbered POP, so therefore the endpoint ID is a 1. Phase 2, a quick snippet of what dropped in for BGP. Obviously more neighbors than this, but this is the basis. And this is also on one of the core routers used to originate our aggregate into our mesh. That's the IPv6 route at the bottom, so that it's available for BGP to propagate. If you'd like any further configuration snippets from us, feel free to contact me. But my goal here was really just to have some sort of operational experience for those of you who were looking to do this kind of deployment and were not yet able to find some case studies. Let me know what kind of questions I can answer, and I'll take questions now. Uh-oh.
Tom Daly, Dynamic Network Services. So with no internal services for DNS, what are you doing for V6 reverses? Because I don't know about you guys, but like no reverses in V4, I can kind of deal with it. Reverses in V6, not having them, makes my life really miserable.
My goal was to have this segment of a V6 deployment completed. My understanding is our DNS infrastructure currently is not ready to do V6. The best I can do to help motivate that forward is to have an operational need. I told our IT department this is coming. You may have a need for it soon. I've told them it's done. You may have a need for it sooner. And it's not my power to force it through. It is what it is. So.
Okay.
Hi, Pete.
Hello.
I'm Louis, Equinix. Your name servers can't answer in V6. Could you at least put the zone record so it can answer in V4?
I'll give that to the DNS folks to deal with. My understanding is we do have a much better, or at least a more ops-centric DNS architecture and team post-acquisition, so they may be better positioned to put that out there.
Thanks for the presentation. It's nice to see various implementations. I'm curious if you have researched to find if there's any other outreach happening on the system side of the world, like the ARIN community, Nano community, RIPE, et cetera, pushing to say, hey guys, it's time to start implementing V6 as well.
And I got that email from Aaron saying, folks, you need to start making a plan. Whatever plan that is, you need to make it, do something. Passed it up the management chain, fell on deaf ears. I said, I need to do something. I
guess partially this is for Aaron. Does Aaron have an outreach program that focuses on system folks as well? Leslie, maybe? Somebody?
So the Aaron outreach is right now, it's been actually, like I said a little bit earlier, it's kind of focused a little bit on the enterprises because they are kind of now well served by, and they're a large contingent of the audience. And actually, I would love to hear from you in terms of where these systems folks are and how we can actually reach them.
I think it might be really neat for Aaron or somebody to allow for a repository of things like scripts. You know, even simple things that parse rancid configs and generate reverse zones and conf files. Just a place we can put them and go, hey, here's what I've done. It's really easy. DNS isn't that hard.
That's already there. Source.aaron.net. So it's available. It's the community repository Aaron put out. It was a policy, it was a suggestion that was that we rolled out at the end of the last year.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Hi. In Japan, some hosting services company or internet access service company provide IPv6 address automatically, even the customer doesn't want it. So I just want to know if you have planned to do the same thing, or do you have something in mind about if you, the reason that you don't do that, or I just want to know that.
Automatic assignment of V6 as part of their service, I see that on a roadmap, but at the time I did this deployment, I knew that the acquisition was possible and felt that it wasn't in my interest, especially given the fact that there's limited routers on which we can actually offer it, that it was easier to leave that part of process automation for future. And I get the impression there's now going to be a bit more structure within our provisioning people, and from there we can make that automatic. And I'm just happy to say I didn't have to listen to Randy Bush, IIJ. It's been missing, and with the amazing boom of these speakers, it's like it's something that's not here. Okay.
Okay, I think we're good. We are running about